and give me 25. I'm the gunny.
It's time for the gunny.
The quarter deck. Lights. Get online right now. You got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hello, my bunch of knuckle-dragging, beer-drinking, hard-charging devil dogs. You're listening to The Quarter Deck. I am your host, Miguel, the Gunny Signs.
Get off the bus!
I do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. You're listening to The Quarter Deck. I am Miguel, the Gunny Signs. It's hard to believe that we are here almost done with another month, and we're starting to get into the time period throughout the year that it's getting closer and closer to holding the Marine Corps birthday as we do every single year. And that's going to be a topic and a subject that we're going to talk about here in the future as we start getting closer and closer to our Marine Corps birthday. This week, we're going to go ahead and close out our conversation regarding disability compensations and end it with the actual application process on how to actually fill out the application and submit it in to get your claim started. After talking about how the 1st Marine Division was going to go ahead and deal with the casualties in our book, No Greater Friend, No Worst Enemy, now we're going to go ahead and start talking about how are they going to augment those individuals in the units that they're going to have to replace or get more individuals out there to actually reinforce the units. And as we move on with the planning of the 1st Marine Division, we'll figure out exactly how they did that. What a ride it's been the past couple of weeks as we've been discussing the disability compensation process, finding out what actually is going to make you eligible to actually apply for this benefit, and so many other different things that we discussed and we talked about. If this is the first week that you're joining us, make sure you go back and listen to the past couple of weeks. If not, back up a whole entire month. That way you can see exactly everything that we covered and everything that has led us to the actual application process on what forms are you going to actually need in order for you to be able to submit your claim to the VA. Now, if we all remember last week, we talked about the different types of ways for you to file the claim, whether it's doing the full developed claim, or if you're about to get out of service to doing the BDD claim, to make sure that you're able to submit this stuff with enough time for you to be able to get everything said and done before you get out of the service or as soon as you get out of the service. That's going to be the most important thing. Now, remember, of course, yes, it's more beneficial for an individual service member or veteran to have done this claim process as they were getting out of the service, because it was going to be a lot easier for them to get everything submitted, because they're going to be able to actually get all the evidence and everything that they need since they're right there and medical's there for them to be able to get all these things done, and anything else that they may need, they're going to be able to gather it right away instead of trying to look for it later on in the future. And that's one of the biggest struggles that, a lot of the veterans or individuals that have been out for a while, it makes it harder for them to actually be able to get all of this evidence that they need for their claim to get processed, because it's been so long since they've gotten out of the service. This is one of the main reasons that I always tell everybody that it's very, very important for you to try to get this process done and get that initial claim submitted while you're getting out of the service. That is why it's very, very important to get that stuff done, to make sure you have it, because it's going to allow the VA to go ahead and have everything in place for you to make sure that you're ready to go and get all that stuff put in place. So, all those individuals that may think that, hey, it's going to be a long process, it's going to be a headache to get this stuff done, from my own experience, okay, and this is based on my own experience. I'm not speaking for every single veteran that is out there. I'm not speaking for every single service member. I'm just speaking from my own experience that the process to get this stuff done was painless. It was not as difficult as people had made it seem. As long as you have all the evidence that you need and all the documentation that the VA is going to ask you for, your claim process is going to go by very smoothly, and you're going to be able to get this process done very, very quickly. Now, in order for you to get this done very quickly, like I mentioned last week, there's some forms that you're going to have to fill out. The very first one that you're going to want to use is the VA Form 21-526EZ. Now, this is the actual application for you to actually apply for disability compensation. Now, like I mentioned before in the past couple of weeks, You can do all of these things digitally on va.gov, which, remember, it is your go-to website for you to be able to go and get any information or fill out any application for any of the benefits that we have been talking about this past couple of weeks. Now, with this form, remember that I talked about all the evidence and everything. It's going to be beneficial for you to submit everything with this form. Now, remember, you can start the form on the va.gov website, and that's going to initiate that intent to file for you to be able to do that. That's very, very important if you're a veteran and you're doing this after you've been out for many years of the service, because your claim is going to get backdated to that date when they receive the application, and you have a year to finalize the claim. If you are an active duty service member that has gotten out of the service and just didn't do the claim when you were getting out of the service, remember that it's very important that you do it within that first year of you getting out of the service, because if you do so, they will backdate the application to the day after the day you got out of the service. So all that back pay is going to keep coming back to you. So you need to make sure that you have all this information, all the evidence, everything else that you're going to need to submit it with your claim when you initially submit this claim. Now, remember, if you are under the actual 90-day mark of you getting out of the service, then you're going to be able to submit the FTC claim or the fully developed claim, or if you're within 90 and 180 days, you can do the BDD claim, the benefits delivery discharge claim. Now, with this form, the 21-526AZ, it is a very, very simple form for you to actually fill out. It's almost, in a way you can look at it, it's kind of self-explanatory. It tells you what to put on there for you to be able to get this stuff submitted correctly. Okay, and it breaks it down for you. In the first couple of pages you're going to have page 1, 2, 3, all the way down till you get to page 8 is going to be all instructions on how to actually fill out the forms. Now, when you do this, on the very top of the application, it's going to ask you, hey, what type of claim are you submitting? And it gives you some options. You got the option to select the fully developed claim, IDES, which is like for those individuals that are getting out because they're being medically separated and so forth and everything. If you're doing that kind of claim, you will know because they're going to help you do that. The Department of Defense will help you do that. So that's only a select few people that will actually do that. The BDD program and a standard claim. See, those are your options for you to select in the top portion of the application. Next, it's going to ask you for all your information. This is going to be your veterans information. Now, remember that I talked to you guys about actually logging in to va.gov. If you log in, all this information is already going to be pre-filled out for you in this application if you're doing it online, because they already have your information. All you have to do is actually just go in there, verify that all the information is correct, and make any corrections to anything you may do. Now, if you print out all these forms and you're filling them out yourself, then you need to make sure that you fill everything out correctly. And it starts off with your, the veteran or service member's name, of course, first, middle, last, your social security number. The VA does ask for the full social, so they're going to have you fill out the full social. It asks you if you've ever filed a claim, yes or no. Now, remember, if you have filed a claim before, could be a claim for you to submit a claim to get an increase or some kind of secondary service-connected condition that we talked about last week. The VA file number, if you have a file number, you'll put it on there. For the most part, everybody's file number is their social security number. So that's why they usually don't have you put it on there both times, because they've already asked you for your social security number. Date of birth, veteran service number, if it's applicable. If you have a veteran service number, then go ahead and put it on there. It asks you if you're male or female. BDD claims only, option number 9. It says provide the date of anticipated data release from active duty. Now remember, this release from active duty date is very, very important. It is not the date that you go on terminal leave. It'll be the last day of your terminal leave. The very next day, that is when you are officially a veteran. So that'll be the date that you put on there. So you need to make sure you have that on there correctly, because remember that you cannot receive any type of VA benefits until you are officially a veteran and you are completely out of the service. So make sure that block number 9 that you put the right date on there, okay? Then we go to block 10, that's going to ask you for your telephone number. Now, it does say optional on the block 10 telephone number, but I'm going to tell you, it is a lot better for you to have the information on there, because that's going to be just one more way that the VA is going to be able to get a hold of you in case they need anything else from you. So you need to make sure that you have that. Block 11 is your current mailing address. Now, this is by far one of the most important things. The VA likes to contact veterans all the time by mail. So you must have a current mailing address to where you are, where you can actually receive mail, because if they ever need anything or they're requesting any additional information from you, that is where they're going to send the documentation. Now, I'm going to tell you guys this from my own experience. If the VA sends you some kind of documentation, it is a federal document they're sending to you. The United States Post Office will not forward federal documents in the mail. They will not do that. I never knew that until when I retired out of the service. And I was waiting for me to get my decision letter in the mail from the VA to let me know that my claim was completed, what percentage I was going to receive, and so forth and so forth. I didn't know that. I had all my mail being forwarded to me. Well, the mail came in. I was no longer at that address because I had a forwarding slip in the post office. They sent it back to the VA. They didn't even bother forwarding it to me because they were not authorized to forward it. So make sure that your current address, your information is correct, and that you're going to be able to receive mail to this address, because that's where they're going to send all this stuff to. Now, your email address, again, this is another optional thing you can put on there. But again, once again, you need to make sure that you understand and you realize that there's just going to be more ways for the VA to get a hold of you in case they need anything in there for that. Number 13, ask if you're currently a VA employee. If you are, go ahead and check that on there. This also includes if you're a work study and so forth, or some kind of internship through the VA, to make sure you do that. And if you do that, then you go ahead and fill out the next portion of the blocks and everything else. Now, if you are temporarily or permanently changing your address, you have to complete items 14A through 14C. It asks you here, is this address that I'm having here is going to be temporary or is it going to be permanent? And it asks you to put the address there, and then it asks you from what date to what date. Now, here is my take on this. One thing that I always tell everybody is that you need to make sure that you are somewhere where you're going to receive mail. I've heard so many service members that were getting out of service telling me, oh, well, once I get out, I'm going to travel. I'm going to be here for a week. I'm going to be here for 2 weeks. Then I'm going to be here for a month. And then eventually I'm going to end up there. How is the VA going to know where you are going to be able to set up any other additional appointments that they may need for you for your disability claim? It's going to make things a lot more complicated, because if they can't get a hold of you, they're going to deny the claim right away. They're going to set it aside. They're going to deny it and give you a rating of 0 completely. It was denied. It was whatever, because they can't get a hold of you. That is why I always tell everybody, make sure that you have a permanent address to where you can receive mail, because whatever address you have on this application, that is where your VA appointments are going to be conducted at, if they haven't done them yet before you got out of the service. So for those individuals that are doing the BDD claim, you really don't have to worry about that unless they want additional appointments. So that's why the address is very, very important. They have to know where you are, because if you still have to do your appointments, this is the address, the area that they're going to actually do your appointments at. And if you're going to be bouncing back and forth from state to address, it's going to be very difficult for them to actually determine where these appointments are going to be. So just make sure you take that into consideration and you understand that, okay? Now, again, your social security number is going to be on top of every single page, so make sure you fill that out. Now, move on to page number 9. It goes into a lot of questions regarding homelessness, and it asks if you're currently homeless, yes or no. If it is yes, you got to go ahead and continue on filling out the rest of the section. If not, you go ahead and move on to the next portion of it. Now it's going to ask you in section 4, the claims information. This is where you're going to list all the different things that you're planning on claiming. Now, what I always tell everybody is go head to toe. Start from your head, go all the way down to your toes, and cover everything. Now, remember what I said about the evidence. You need to have the evidence to show that some of these issues did occur while you were in the active service. So you need to make sure that you have the documentation or the evidence that's going to explain that. And this is the way that it breaks it down. It gives you some examples on the top of the section 4 of the actual claim application. Examples: hearing loss. What was the exposure to that? Loud noises. Examples of how disability relate to your service. working on heavy equipment operations in the service, and examples of the dates, approximate dates. Are not going to want exact dates of things that happen. Okay, diabetes related to Agent Orange, service in the Vietnam War, etc., etc., etc. Another example is left knee, secondary to the right knee. Remember, we talked about secondary conditions last week. That is how you would put that on there, an approximate date and so forth and everything else. So you will put the current disability, and it does say if it is due to exposure, event, or injury, please specify. Okay, explain how the disabilities relates to your in-service injury and the approximate date that the disability came about or that it got worse. So example of that, okay, yeah, like it says on top, the hearing loss, exposure to that, combat operations, artillery operations, in my case, stuff like that. How does it relate to in-service injury? Hello, I worked on loud noises for 20 plus years. That is why my hearing is shot. And it gives you options there to do up to 15 different things that you want to claim. Does that mean that's all you can do? No, of course not. If you need additional spaces, you can attach additional pages on there for the things that you're planning on claiming. Now, again, like I tell everybody, go head to toe, cover everything, make sure everything is put on there the first time. Let them take a look at it. A lot of the things you put on there, you're going to notice that when they rate them from that 0 to 100%, some of them might be rated at 0%. But remember, 0% means that it is a service-connected condition. So therefore, you're eligible to be able to submit another claim in the future to get an increase on that. So that's why it's important for you to put it on there, because it just has to be service-connected. That's the one thing that you want to do, make sure that it's service-connected. And this way, it makes it easier for you for the future. Okay, so just make sure that you document everything and put it on there. And again, head to toe, your leg's your leg, your knee's your knee, and so forth and everything else. We don't want to mention every little carpal tunnel or whatever you call phalanges, every single bone in your hand, unless you got specific documentation showing those things. Surgeries, very, very important. Make sure you document any surgeries. Make sure you include the surgical reports that you can include with your paperwork, and that all that stuff should be in your medical records. But remember, that's the key word. The key word is should. Okay. Make sure that the stuff is on there, and a lot of this documentation you might have to get from civilian doctors that you went out there and saw out in town. So make sure you grab that stuff, put it on there. Okay. Joints, very, very important. Put that stuff on there. Okay. The next portion here, it says, list any VA medical centers and Departments of Defense military treatment facilities where you receive treatment and so forth. Okay, for most individuals, it's going to be the base that they were located at. So, like in the case where I'm at here, it would be Marine Corps Station in Yuma, Arizona, that the clinic is there and so forth and everything else. If you have received treatment in other locations, you can annotate them on there as well, because you can put them on there to show that hey, I received treatment for these things in these locations and so forth and everything else for that. Okay, now that is that portion there. Okay, now there's additional forms that you can submit for that. Okay, now if you want to put supplemental claims, you want to submit something else, that is VA Form 20-0995. That is for the decision request review for the supplemental claim. If you have dependents, remember I talked about how you might be eligible for additional compensation because of your dependents. Now, the dependents claim form is VA Form 21-686, VA Form 21-686C. I'm getting excited here with myself. Okay. Now, if you're claiming a child that is aged between the ages of 18 to 23 and they're in school, you also have to include the VA Form 21-674. Now, this is the form that you will submit for you to include your dependents in your claim, because they are your dependents. You may be eligible to receive additional income for those individuals. Okay. Individual unemployability, if that's something that you want to put in for. Okay, that's VA Form 21-8940 and VA Form 21-4192. You got to make sure you submit those for the unemployability. That's up to each individual person. If you want to put that, put it on there. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, VA Form 21-0781 or 21-0781 alpha. Those are the two forms for PTSD that you have to fill out. Additional forms and so forth and everything else. Special allowance for housing form. If this is something that you want to put in for because of your disabilities, that's an additional actual benefit you can receive. and that is VA Form 26-4555. Automobile allowance. If you're eligible to receive allowance for an automobile to purchase a vehicle because of your disabilities, and that is VA Form 21-4502. And then veteran spouse aid and attendance benefits, VA Form 21-2680. Again, if in some kind of nursing home or stuff like that, then they need to be in some kind of nursing home, then it's VA Form 21-0779. Now, don't get discouraged about all these forms and stuff. Not everybody is going to need all these different types of forms. It really depends on the things that you're planning on claiming. Now, again, remember, the most important one is going to be the easy form that we just went over and the dependence form. Those are the main ones that you want to do. Any of the other forms that are on there besides the PTSD one, if you're claiming PTSD, if you're eligible for those, then you can submit them at a later date to help get those additional benefits for you to have. Okay. Then the next section, which is section 5, is the service information, that we're ask you if you've ever served under a different name. Now, for those individuals that maybe were in a dual marriage or you got married and you changed your last name, that is where you put that stuff on there. Branch of service, where you active duty reserves or National Guard. Your most recent active duty service dates. So when you came into the service, the month, the day of the year. When you got out of the service, the month, the day of the year. Remember, your last day is your last official day of active service, not the day you go on terminal leave. Now, Block 20 Bravo. This is your place or last anticipated separation. So your last duty station. That is where you're being separated from. So that is what you would put on that block there. 20 Charlie, it asks you, did you serve in a combat zone since 9/11 to 2001? Yes or no. If you have any other additional periods of service, so let's say if you got out, came back in, and so forth, you put the dates there in that block as well. And then it asks you, are you currently serving or have ever served in the reserves or National Guard? Yes or no. That'll be depending on each individual. You put that on there, and then it asks you what component, National Guard or reserves, from what date to what date, and so forth, and everything else. Then it asks you the current or last assigned name, address, or unit that you were in. This is all for the reservists. And current or assigned phone number for the unit. And are you currently receiving inactive duty training pay? Yes or no. Again, this is all for the reserves. Okay. Block 22A, are you currently activated on federal orders with the National Guard or reserves? So it asks all that stuff and everything else, the date you were activated, the date you were separated, so forth and everything else. It asks you, have you ever been a prisoner of war? For the majority of everybody, that's going to be no, except for our older veterans that are out there. It asks you if you're receiving military pay, yes or no. Will you receive military retirement pay in the future, yes or no? If you are, then you will put yes on there and stuff and everything else, and then they will explain to you what it means to get the disability compensation with military retirement pay, so forth and everything else. Then it asks you what branch of service. If you know the amount you're going to be receiving, put it on there. If not, leave it blank. It doesn't really matter. You can leave that blank. And the retired status, if you're retired, permanently disabled retired list, or temporarily disabled retired list, and so forth and everything else. Then it asks you here. There's a question here right underneath that. And I'm going to read this verbatim. This is exactly what it says. Okay. It says submission of this application constitutes a waiver of military retired pay in the amount equal to VA compensation awarded if you are entitled to both benefits. Your retired pay may be reduced by the amount of VA compensation awarded. Receipt of a full amount of military retired pay and VA compensation at the same time may result in an overpayment, which may be subject to collection. If you qualify for concurrent receipt of VA compensation and military retired pay, the waiver of retired pay will not apply. If you do not want to waive any retired pay to receive VA compensation, you should check the box in item 26. Note that if you check the box in item 26, you will not receive VA compensation. Okay, let me say that again. That if you check the item in box 26, you will not receive VA compensation. If granted, if you are currently in the receipt of VA compensation and you check the box in item 26, your VA compensation will be terminated if you're also eligible for military retired pay. Now, what does that mean? Okay, what it means is that Congress mandated that you cannot receive military retirement pay and VA disability compensation at the same time. However, they have a workaround that. Okay, what if you are above 50% or higher disabled by the VA, you will receive both. Okay, there's a waiver for that, so you'll receive both. If you are below that, what they will do is that, let's say you receive, your retirement pay is $2,000 and your disability compensation is going to be $1,000. What they will do is they'll take $1,000 from your retirement pay and they're going to make that tax free. So kind of like that $1,000 is going to be tax free, just like the VA disability compensation would be. It'll be tax free as well. But that's how that works. But if you're above 50, if you're 50% or higher, now you're going to receive both. Your retirement pay is still going to be taxed. However, your VA disability compensation will not be taxed. So then it asks you, little 26, it says, do not pay me VA compensation. I do not want to receive VA compensation in lieu of retirement pay. Leave that blank. Don't check that box. Just leave it blank. Okay, because if you do rate disability compensation in the future, and let's say you're rated at 100%, you check this box in your initial claim. You're telling the VA that you don't care that you're 100%, you don't want any VA compensation payment from them every single month. Just leave it blank. Okay, you'll thank me in the future. Just trust me, leave it blank. Okay, so it has that stuff and everything else that you have it on there. Then once you do that, section 7 is your direct deposit information. Make sure that information is correct. That is where your VA disability compensation will go if you qualify for it. And if you're going to receive anything and they ask you for your account number, whether it's checking your savings and the name of the institution, the routing number, and so forth and so forth. Then it's going to ask you for your signature on the bottom, the date you signed that. And then it has 2 sections for witnesses there. You can leave that blank. The witnesses will sign the VA representative that fills out this form for you. They'll go ahead and take care of the witness section for there. If not, if you have an appointment with them there in person, they will make sure that they have somebody sign as a witness for you. And that's it. That is the whole entire application. Now, normally this takes maybe approximately about 15, 20 minutes to fill out the application. It is not a long process. Very simple process for you to fill out. And it's easy to get this document turned in and make sure that you get the process started for you to start receiving your disability compensation checks in the near future. So, I mean, I know we've been talking about this for, God, it seems like it's been forever since we've been talking about disability compensation. However, it is a very, very important conversation for veterans and service members alike to have, because it is a benefit that you rate and you can use in the future. But it's not only for you, though. We got to think about our family. Think about your dependents, your survivors, that if something should happen to you, because of your disabilities and things that you've done, they could still qualify for additional benefits after you're no longer here. And, you know, for me, that gives me a little bit of a peace of mind knowing that because of my service, that my children, my spouse will have additional benefits because of the time that I was in the service, because of my disabilities that I've had now that I'm out of the service. So it's important. It is important, you know, and I guess the best way that I could put it is that we don't want to be selfish and you know, conceited to ourselves, saying whatever, it's not important, blah, blah, blah. But it is important to our family. It's important to our family to make sure that they are going to be taken care of once we are no longer here, to actually take care of them, that they have that small peace of mind that there's going to be something that they're going to be able to use because of the time and everything that you did in the service that they can take advantage of for the future. So next week, we'll go ahead and continue and move on to our next benefit. And I'm going to take a poll and I'm going to look at my Facebook page and let me know what benefit you guys want to talk about next week. I want to hear from you guys. Let me know what is important to you, and when that is what we're going to discuss next week. The Quarter Deck is brought to you by Miguel Science Photography. From the beginning of your family to the first birthday and beyond, whether it's a retirement or a Marine Corps ball, Miguel Science Photography is there to make memories that will last a lifetime. Miguel Science Photography is a certified veteran-owned business. Contact them at miguelsciencephotography.com.
What we're going to do right here is go back. Way back into time.
The planning process is moving along, and the 1st Marine Division is getting closer and closer to getting everything prepared for the division to head into Iraq and liberate the people there from the tyrant known as Saddam Hussein. Now, last week we talked about how the division was actually going to plan for the casualties that were going to happen, because, it's inevitable. Things are going to happen. There's going to be individuals who are going to lose their lives, and there's nothing that can be done about that. It's going to happen, and they had to plan for that whole entire process. And that is what we talked about last week. But this week, let's talk about how they were preparing to actually augment the units that actually were going to lose these individuals, or the casualties that were going to happen. How are they going to augment them and actually get more personnel there to replace them in case they needed to? Now, another thing to take into consideration is that a lot of individuals were not allowed to get out when they were supposed to. The stop loss and stop move went into effect. So nobody was getting out of the Marine Corps. Nobody was moving. Nobody was going out and executing orders to transfer to different units or anything else, or any type of B billets. They weren't being allowed to do so. So they had to come up with this plan to be able to augment units, because not everybody that needed to be in place was there in every single unit before this whole thing kicked off. So they had to make sure that they had a way to get more people there, how to continue to provide the individuals that were graduating from the military occupational specialty schools, or MOS schools, and heading out to the fleet. How are they going to get them out there to their units, and what was the best plan for them to actually get there? And, I can remember that we had numerous Marines that joined us out there when we were out there in Kuwait, waiting and standing by to get ready to go across the border to head out there, because there was a couple of sergeants that we still needed, corporals, lance corporals, the PFCs, the new people that we were just getting. They were just getting to us, so we needed to go ahead and get them there. And that was all part of this whole planning process of what the division was going through. So let's go ahead and get into this and see exactly what they were planning on doing in order to do this. And this is the personnel planning augmentation process that the division went through in order to get all this whole process in place. So let's go ahead and get into it this week and discuss what they were planning. So planning for personnel augmentation to fill both existing shortfalls and additional requirements based upon the war plan presented unique challenges. Initially, the G1 Lieutenant Colonel Kathy Pulowski identified personnel shortfalls based on the 1st Marine Division's current table of organizations, or TO. Critical manpower shortfalls to TO were evident early on as battalions just returning from deployments, most notably the 1st Battalion 7th Marines 1-7, were at 65% of TO due to heavy attrition, which normally follows post-deployment under the Corps Cycle Readiness paragraph. This policy caused many units to fall to non-mission capable manning levels for readiness reporting status. There were shortfalls in NCO ranks across the board, especially in low-density MOSs. Some of the division's units prepared to go in harm's way well short of full strength. Trusting in the spirits of their Marines and to compensate for their fewer members, commanders focused and prepared the Marines they had and put their faith in Lieutenant Colonel Pulaski to find as many Marines as possible to fill the ranks. The G1 worked non-stop, using many creative innovations to find ways to increase divisions in strength. Manpower, Management and Enlisted Affairs, MMA, did assist in limiting the impact caused by personnel shortfalls. They redistributed School of Infantry SOI graduates program for 2nd Marine Division to reconstitute the 1st Marine Division's critically short battalions. So imagine that. All these individuals that were going to initial training to the School of Infantry, that were initially scheduled to go to the 2nd Marine Division in the East Coast, were now being redirected from there and being sent to the 1st Marine Division down here in California. So they were taking personnel from them just to make sure that they had the manpower that was going to be needed for the 1st Marine Division to head into Iraq. Because the 1st Marine Division were the ones heading in there. The 2nd Marine Division was going to be still here in the States, providing support if needed. They allowed extensions in 90-day increments for those who did not want to re-enlist for 4 years. This is the stop loss that I was talking about, but wanted to fight alongside their fellow Marines. Where feasible, they also modified approved retirement dates to those who wanted to stay and fight. One of the most critical personnel shortfalls was the Trained Forward Air Controllers, or FACs. The G3 Air shop began efforts to staff back billets to TO, but by the end of January of 2002, deficiencies still existed. Manpower Management Officers Assignments (MMOA) branch would not meet these requirements as no deployment orders were yet issued. 3rd MAW once again stepped forward as the division's best friend in the fight. 3rd MAW began to look at the ways to fill every gap to set the team up for success. The wing also began to set aside training days to ensure these FACs, once on board, would be brought up to their potential capabilities. Ultimately, the divisions identified the need for additional 18 FACs and air officers. This number would be sufficient to staff the division and subordinate commands for combat operations. The division would continue to fight for FACs until the end of February of 2003. So wow. So if you can imagine, here's the division getting ready to head out to deploy to a combat environment, and yet the units were well undermanned. And I can tell you that even for me and for the Marines that were there and deployed with me, we saw that. We saw how we were shorthanded for individuals that were going to be deploying with us, because it's just like they said, units come back from deployments from being gone on, whether it's on a Westpax or they were in Okinawa for a UDP, whatever. They come back and Marines rotate. They rotate, they move, they get orders, they go somewhere else. They get sent to other units because they can't deploy again because of their time that they're about to get out of the service. And then that was hard, because so many individuals that were moving pieces. And now we're getting ready to get the orders to head out to Iraq, and the units were shorthanded. So yeah, definitely the stop loss, stop move, helped a lot with that. But all those individuals that were stop loss, they were there doing what they needed to do in order to accomplish the mission. But, a lot of them, they were there, and some of them didn't want to be there, but they weren't allowed to go home because they couldn't. They couldn't go home. They had to stay because they needed to be there with the units to make sure that the mission was going to be a success and that everything was going to be accomplished that needed to be accomplished. So, if you just think about it for 1 second and put yourself in the shoes of those individual Marines. They were in the process of getting ready to get out of the service. They're like, oh yeah, my time is about to get out. Nope. You're sticking around. You're not going anywhere just yet. So, if you can imagine, what individuals went through. Now, as far as for me, I fell into the stop move portion of that, because I already had my orders to go to the drill field on April 1st of 2003. I was scheduled to go to the drill field to start my DI school training to go down to the MCRD in San Diego. Little did I know my orders were going to get canceled because they needed me to go on this deployment. So that is when later on in the future, when I was floating back, that I decided to resubmit for orders again, and they were approved once again, and I finally made my way out there in 2004. And I go into more detail with that in one of my earlier podcasts, but I'm pretty sure that here in the future, we're going to go ahead and go back in detail and talk a little bit more about my experiences down there on the depot and MCRD in San Diego. But next week, we're going to go ahead and continue on and look forward more to a little bit more of the preparation and the planning of getting the division ready to go.
The quarter deck.
There is still so much information that we can go over regarding all the different types of benefits that are available from the VA. This week, we finally concluded our conversation regarding disability compensation. I encourage you that if you have any questions, you have anything that you may have that you want to ask, please go to our Facebook page, The Quarterdeck with Gunny Signs, and you're able to put comments on there, and I'll be able to answer the questions come next week regarding of some of the questions that you may have, or as well as you can just simply send me a private message on there, and I'll reach out to you and be able to get with you one-on-one, because a lot of the situations can be touchy. I don't like talking personal stuff, whether it's over this podcast or anything like that. I'd rather handle that one-on-one and be able to help you find the research and find answers to any questions that you may have. But as we move on here in the next couple of weeks for the rest of the year, and as we get closer to our beloved Marine Corps birthday, there's going to be lots of things for us to be able to discuss and a lot of things for us to talk about. But we can't set aside the VA benefits because it is very, very important. And I know that's been something that a lot of you have been wanting to talk about the last past couple of months. We want to make sure that we stay on top of that as well. With our book, No Greater Friend, No Worst Enemy, wow. Last week we discussed conversation regarding casualties, and now, the division is trying to figure out a way how to augment the units that are so short-handed right now. And all those units are going to be short-handed once they get into country. Now they're working out that plan to be able to get those individuals from the East Coast and redirect them over to the West Coast to the 1st Marine Division. So there's a lot of planning, a lot of process things that have to go through, and they have to be in place in order for everything to actually work itself out. So hopefully everybody can put themselves in the shoes of the Marines of the 1st Marine Division. Those of you that were there with me, we can relate to this so much. And we can put ourselves back in the same positions that these Marines were in. The smells, the sights, the sounds, all those things. I can guarantee you that as we get closer and closer in the book, as we move forward and forward, those memories are going to flash back, and it's going to be like you're there again. So thank you again for joining me this week on another podcast here on the Quarterdeck. A reminder to you that we are available on all the podcasting applications. The Quarterdeck with Gunny Signs Facebook page is open. It's available there for you to submit your comments or anything that you want to put on there. And I thank you again for joining me, allowing me to come into your home, your car, wherever you're listening to me from. I appreciate it. And I look forward to chatting with you guys next week and sharing more information. Until then, this is Miguel, the Gunny Signs, sounding Liberty Call.
Get out the bus!
I do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.